My own son put the pen in my hand, sweating cold, believing that my tired eyes wouldn't see the word bill of sale at the top of the page. I'm Bernadette. I have 74 years of plowing dirt and raising cattle under my belt. And even though I walk slow, my mind runs faster than a jackrabbit. He didn't know that while I faked a tremble, I was already calculating how long it would take the police to arrive and take away this stranger who carries my last name. The air conditioning in the notary's office was cranked so high it got right into my bones. But that wasn't what made me feel cold. It was Roger's eyes. My Roger, the same boy whose scraped knees I used to patch up when he'd fall off his bike on the dirt roads of Hope Ranch. Now he was looking at me with an anxiety that wasn't worry, but pure greed. We were sitting across from a polished wooden desk, shiny and fake, a far cry from the old, honest timber of my kitchen table back home. "Come on, Mom, sign right here," Roger insisted, tapping the paper with an index finger chewed raw down to the quick. "It's just the pension paperwork I told you about, so the checks come straight to you, and you don't have to drive into town every month. You know how your legs ache." I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders. It wasn't just any shawl. It was heavy wool I knit 20 years ago when my husband, the late Everett, was still breathing. That shawl smelled like wood smoke and home, and right then, it was my only armor in an office that reeked of cheap pine cleaner and lies. "Hold your horses, son," I told him, my voice raspy, faking that clumsy slowness young folks think all us old people have. "Let me get my glasses. You know without my borrowed eyes, I couldn't spot a mule 3 paces away." Roger let out a heavy sigh, checking the watch on his wrist, a gold, flashy thing he sure as hell didn't pay for with honest work. The notary, a bald guy with a bored face who hadn't even bothered to look me in the eye, was typing something on his computer, either oblivious or in on it. I didn't know yet. I dug into my leather purse, that beaten black bag that has gone with me to livestock auctions and funerals alike. My fingers brushed against my wooden rosary, the keys to the old truck, and finally, the glasses case. I took my sweet time. I wiped the lenses with the edge of my shawl, slow, methodical, absolutely maddening. "Mom, please, the attorney is in a hurry," Roger said, and I caught that high-pitched squeak in his voice he used to get as a kid when I caught him stealing sweets from the pantry. "The man charges by the hour, Roger. I doubt he minds an old woman taking her time," I answered, pinning the man behind the desk with a hard stare. The notary cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, but kept his mouth shut. I put my glasses on. The world snapped into sharp focus, and there it was. Treason, printed on legal-size bond paper. It didn't say pension application. It didn't say administrative filing. The black letters, clear and cruel, read deed of transfer. And right below that, the details of my ranch, my 120 acres, the holding pens, the main house, the deep well, the orchards my father planted, everything. Roger had slid my own living death sentence right under my nose. He wanted to sell me out. He wanted to leave me without a roof, without dirt, without a history. I felt a kick in my chest, like one of my heifers had stomped right on my heart. For a second, everything went dark. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and slap him right there in front of the bald lawyer and the secretary snapping her gum out in the lobby. I wanted to ask him exactly when his soul rotted out, when the little boy who used to bring me wildflowers turned into this vulture. But I swallowed it down. Years of haggling with crooked cattle brokers and surviving droughts had taught me one thing. Whoever gets mad first loses. And whoever loses, loses it all. I clamped my jaw shut and took a deep breath, filling my lungs with that manufactured air. "Oh, son," I gasped, dropping the pen onto the paper. "I just got a terrible cramp." Roger rolled his eyes, throwing his head back. "Come on, Mom. Seriously. Just sign it, and I'll take you to the gas station bathroom." No. It's my blood pressure medicine. It tears up my stomach, I lied, pressing a hand to my belly and twisting my face into a wince. I can't sign like this. My hand is shaking. I need to use the restroom right now. The notary, probably terrified I was going to ruin his fake leather chair, pointed down the hall. Back and to the right, ma'am. It's unlocked. Roger looked at me with pure disgust, but he helped me out of the chair. His hand on my arm felt foreign. Ice cold. Don't take forever, Mom. We need to get out of here. I won't be a minute, son. Just a minute. I shuffled toward the bathroom, dragging my boots a little more than necessary, leaning heavily against the drywall. The second I closed that bathroom door and slid the deadbolt, the fragile little old lady mask hit the floor. I stood up straight. My hands were shaking, sure, but from rage. An ancient, volcanic fury. I looked in the mirror. I saw my gray hair, my wrinkles, the map of a life spent breaking my back under the sun. I saw Bernadette, the woman who was widowed young and pulled the ranch back from the brink when every man in the county said a woman couldn't work the land. Was I going to let an ungrateful brat, even if he was my own flesh and blood, strip me of what was mine? The legacy meant for my grandkids, if I ever had any? Over my dead body, Roger, I whispered to the glass. I pulled my cell phone from my purse. It wasn't one of those modern sheets of glass. It was a heavy block with big buttons and a loud speaker, but it did exactly what it needed to do. I dialed from memory. Not 911. No, I dialed the direct line for Jackson, the county sheriff. Jackson had been Everett's closest friend, and even though he was half-deaf these days, he was the law in our valley, and a man of his word. Yeah. The gravelly voice answered on the third ring. Jackson, it's Bernadette. Bernadette from Hope Ranch. Bernie, it's been a minute. How are you holding up? Something happened with the herd? Shut up and listen, Jackson. I don't have time. I'm down at the notary's office on Main, next to the bank. My son. My voice cracked just a fraction, but I bit my lip hard and pushed through. My son Roger brought me here on a lie. He's trying to make me sign away the ranch, telling me it's pension paperwork. There was a heavy silence on the other end. Jackson knew what land meant to people like us. He knew it was holy. That son of a bitch, Jackson growled. Are you okay? Did he put his hands on you? No, not yet. I locked myself in the bathroom. But I need you here. And don't come alone. Bring your deputies. This is attempted fraud, elder abuse, whatever fancy words the lawyers use. I want him dragged out of here in handcuffs, Jackson. I want him publicly shamed. I'm on my way, Bernie. I'm 2 blocks out. Don't come out until you hear the sirens. Better yet, I'll go out and stall him. Give me 5 minutes. Flying, he said, and the line went dead. I hung up. I stared at the phone for a heartbeat before dropping it back in my bag. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was as cold as a mountain creek in January. I splashed water on my face, smoothed my hair, straightened my collar. I wasn't going to walk out of there crying. I wasn't going to walk out begging for mercy. I was going to walk out as the absolute owner of Hope Ranch. I opened the door. The hallway felt a mile long now. At the end of it, I saw Roger's back. He was leaning over the notary's desk, laughing about something, probably counting his dirty money before it was even printed. Money stained with his mother's sweat. I walked slow. Every footstep was a funeral march for the son I thought I had, and a harsh welcome to the reality I had to face. About time, Mom, Roger said, spotting me and slapping that mask of fake concern back on his face. Have a seat. Come on. The attorney has another appointment. I sat down. The notary pushed the document back toward me. Right here, ma'am. Just a signature and a thumbprint. I picked up the pen. It felt like it was cast out of solid lead. Roger was staring holes into me, his eyes gleaming. He was rubbing his hands together, a nervous tic he always got when he thought he was getting away with murder. You know, son? I said, hovering the pen in the air, right above the dotted line. I was just thinking about your dad. Roger went rigid. Mom, don't start with the stories. Just sign. I was thinking about the day he taught you to ride. You were 6. He told you that you can't lie to a horse, because the animal smells the fear and the lie, and it'll throw you. What the hell does that have to do with anything? Roger's patience snapped. His voice spiked, turning mean. The notary stopped typing and looked up, genuinely nervous now. Just that life is a lot like that horse, Roger. You lie to it, it throws you. Sign the damn paper. He screamed, slamming his fist on the desk. The notary jumped in his chair. Sir, please, the bald man squeaked. And that was the moment. Right as Roger raised his hand, maybe to intimidate me, maybe to physically force my hand onto the paper, we heard it. Faint at first, then deafening. The wail of sirens. Not just one cruiser. 2. Tires shrieked against the asphalt right outside the plate glass windows. Red and blue lights exploded across the office blinds, painting the walls in the frantic colors of an emergency. Roger froze, his hand still suspended in the air. He looked at the window, then back at me. His face melted from rage to confusion, and from confusion to pure, unadulterated terror in a matter of seconds. What is that? He stammered. I set the pen down on the desk, gently, with a calm that surprised even me. I took off my glasses and snapped them shut in their case. The heavy thud of combat boots charging up the front steps echoed down the hall, steps with authority. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and looked my son dead in the eye. I didn't see the boy with the scraped knees anymore. I saw a stranger. And I don't feel pity for strangers who try to rob me. I believe that's for you, son, I told him, right as the office door was kicked wide open, and Jackson's massive frame filled the doorway. Roger went the color of chalk. In his eyes, I saw the exact moment the math clicked. He hadn't tricked a senile old woman. He had tried to bite the hand of a woman who broke 1,000-pound beasts with a single look. And now, the beast was awake. Watching your only child being marched out by 2 deputies, hands cuffed behind his back, head hung in shame, that is not something a mother ever expects to see. You raise them to be good men, to walk a straight line. But there was Roger, being shoved none too gently into the back of a squad car, while the secretary stood there with her jaw unhinged, totally forgetting to chew her endless gum. The silence left behind in that office was heavier than a 50-pound bag of feed. The notary, that sweaty little bald man, stood paralyzed by his desk, mopping his forehead with a crumpled tissue. He didn't dare look at me. He knew damn well that if I had signed that paper, he would have taken a fat slice of the pie. He was a silent accomplice, the kind of coward who kills without ever getting blood on his own hands. Mrs. Bernadette, he started stammering, his voice shaking. I had no idea. Roger told me you were fully on board, that it was just internal family business. I acted in good faith. I stood up slowly, planting my hands flat on his fake wood desk. I felt the smooth, cold veneer under my calloused palms. I looked at him over the rim of my glasses, the very glasses that had been my shield and my salvation. Counselor, I said, my voice as hard and dry as river rocks in August. Good faith doesn't hide behind fine print and fake titles. You looked at an old woman in work boots and assumed she was stupid. You thought because I wear a shawl, my brain must have dried up. The man swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down like a cork. If I ever find out that my name, or the name of my ranch, crosses this desk again without me sitting right here with my own damn lawyer, I swear on my dead husband's grave there won't be enough left of your license to sell hot dogs on the corner. Do we understand each other? Yes, ma'am. Perfectly clear, ma'am. I scooped my purse off the floor and slung it over my shoulder with the dignity of a queen adjusting her crown. I walked out without looking back, leaving the air conditioner humming its cold, artificial tune. Stepping out onto the sidewalk, the afternoon sun hit my face. It was the sun of my homeland, hot, honest, brutal. I walked over to my truck, a '98 Ford that roared like an aging lioness but had never once left me stranded. I climbed in, slammed the heavy door shut, and just sat there for a minute. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned bone white. Only then, in the absolute isolation of the cab, did I let myself shed a tear. Just one. It rolled hot and salty down my cheek, getting lost in the deep lines of my skin. I wasn't crying over the ranch. I wasn't crying over the money. I was crying because I had just buried the son I thought I had, and now I had to go to war with the stranger who took his place. Roger wasn't just a boy acting out. He was a man broken by greed, and I, his own mother, never saw it coming. I turned the key. The familiar rumble of the engine settled my nerves. I threw it in drive and pulled onto the highway heading back to Hope Ranch. As I drove, watching the telephone poles and the miles of sorghum blur past, I started doing the math. Not money math, reality math. What did I actually have? I was 74. I had a hip that acted like a barometer and eyes that needed help reading the paper. I had 120 acres of prime dirt, 60 head of cattle, 3 horses, and a house haunted by memories. But more than anything, I had the one weapon Roger completely underestimated. I had time. Young people like my son live at a dead sprint. They want everything yesterday. They want the fast cash, the new truck, the instant respect. They think we old folks are invisible. They see us sitting in rocking chairs or shuffling through the grocery store, and they assume our lives are over. That we're just old furniture waiting to be dragged to the curb. Roger looked at me and saw a passive obstacle. He thought, my mom's old. She's confused. She won't fight back. That was his fatal mistake. He didn't realize that old age isn't a weakness. It's camouflage. It's a sniper's trench. We sit there in silence, gathering intel, while the rest of the world makes noise. I pulled up to the gates of Hope Ranch. The old wooden sign, weathered by decades of sun, welcomed me home. The dogs rushed the truck, barking their heads off in pure joy. I stepped out and nodded to Toby, my foreman. Toby was a man of few words, loyal as the dirt he stood on, who had been working for me since Everett was alive. Afternoon, boss, Toby said, tipping his sweat-stained hat. Everything go all right in town? I stared at him. Toby knew things. Ranch hands always know things, before the owners do. If Roger was tangled up in something ugly, Toby had to have seen the signs. Everything's fine, Toby, I lied, keeping my chin up. But we're making some changes. Tomorrow morning, I want the boys up early. We're doing a full inventory. Everything. The herd, the equipment, the feed. I want to know exactly how many rusty nails are sitting in the shed. Toby gave me a sideways look. We didn't do hard counts out of season. Something wrong, Mrs. Bernadette? On the contrary, Toby. We're getting the house in order. And one more thing. If you see Roger driving up, do not open that gate. If he tries to force his way in, you radio me immediately. And if he gets stupid, let the dogs off the chain. Toby's eyes went wide as saucers, but he gave a single, sharp nod. He didn't ask questions. That's the kind of loyalty money can't buy. I walked into the main house. It was cool and shadowed. The smell of floor wax and morning coffee still hung in the air. I went straight to my bedroom, but not to sleep. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the massive oak wardrobe against the wall. Roger acted out of sheer desperation. Nobody tries to steal from their own mother and sell off the family legacy unless the water is rising over their head. I needed to know exactly how deep that water was. I needed to know who I was actually fighting. Was this just Roger's greed, or was there a puppet master? Gambling debts? Women? Shady deals? I stood up and walked down the hall to the guest room Roger used when he actually bothered to visit, which was rare lately. I pushed the door open. The room smelled stale, tainted with that cheap, sweet cologne he always wore. I started tearing the place apart. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. Privacy is a privilege you forfeit the second you try to put your mother out on the street. I went through the nightstand. Nothing but car magazines and stale gum. I stripped the mattress. Nothing. I opened the closet and patted down the pockets of the few shirts he'd left behind. In the breast pocket of an old denim jacket, my fingers brushed paper. It was a crumpled bank deposit slip, not in his name. It was made out to a man named Elias Montgomery. The amount made the blood freeze in my veins. $50,000, dated 2 weeks ago. 50 grand is a hell of a lot of money for a casual transfer. And the name Montgomery rang a bell. That was city money, loan sharks. The kind of people who don't play games. I kept digging. Buried under a pile of empty shoeboxes at the back of the closet, I found a metal tin, the kind fancy cookies come in. I popped the lid. No cookies, just letters, collection notices. Legal threats from credit card companies maxed out to the limit. And at the very bottom, the worst of it. A piece of notebook paper with a jagged, ugly scrawl. You have until the end of the month, Roger. You pay with the ranch, or you pay in blood. You know we don't miss. A cold shiver traced its way down my spine. I had to sit down on my son's bed just to keep my legs from giving out. So that was it. He wasn't just chasing luxury. He was a dead man walking. They were going to kill him. And in his cowardice and staggering stupidity, he decided it was easier to sacrifice his parents' life work than face the music. He tried to feed me to the wolves to save his own skin. The rage flared up again, but this time it was cut with a cold, calculating dread. If these people wanted the ranch, putting Roger behind bars didn't solve the problem. Roger, in a cell, just bought me time. The second they realized the sale fell through, they'd come collecting, and they wouldn't be carrying notary paperwork. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. I walked out of the room and locked the door behind me. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands had stopped shaking. My mind was crystal clear, drawing lines, connecting the dots. The invisibility of old age, Roger had banked on it. But these guys, this Montgomery crew, they were banking on it too. They figured Roger would easily manipulate his sweet old mother, or if he failed, they could just roll over the old lady themselves. They had no idea that Bernadette of Hope Ranch had defended these exact fence lines from squatters 30 years ago with a shotgun in her hands while Everett was laid out with typhoid. They didn't know I knew every ravine, every cave, and every blind spot on this property. I needed a battle plan. I couldn't just sit on the porch waiting for the repo men to show up. First, I needed to lock down the deed. Tomorrow morning, I'd drive into the city, the real city, not the county seat, and find a cutthroat real estate lawyer. I'd put the ranch in an airtight trust, make it completely untouchable, even by me, so that nobody could ever force a signature out of me at gunpoint. Second, I needed liquid cash. Not to pay Roger's debt. He could rot and learn his lesson. The cash was to defend myself, to hire muscle if I had to, or to have a bug-out fund if I needed to vanish for a while. I walked over to the pantry. It's a small, naturally cool room where we keep the sacks of beans, the corn, the preserves. I put my shoulder against a heavy wooden shelving unit loaded with clay pots and shoved. Behind it, built into the wall, was a stone that looked exactly like the rest of the masonry, except it was loose. I pried it out. My fingers ached, my arthritis screaming in protest, but the stone gave way. Inside that dark hole, carved out by Everett 40 years ago, was my real insurance policy. Not a bank. Banks go under, tellers talk. Inside was an antique forged iron lockbox. I reached down my shirt and pulled up the heavy iron key I kept on the same chain as my scapular. The key slid into the lock and turned with a heavy, satisfying clack. I popped the lid. There it was. Stacks of $100 bills vacuum-sealed in plastic to keep the damp out. Gold coins my grandfather buried during the Depression, passed down through the bloodline, and wrapped in a piece of red velvet, my husband's old Colt .45. I traced the cold steel of the barrel. It felt like an old friend, I checked the magazine, fully loaded. Everett always kept it hot. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, he used to say. I grabbed the cash and the gun. I shoved the stone back in place and dragged the shelf over it. Nobody, not even Roger, knew about this stash. He always assumed every dime we had was tied up in the bank or grazing in the pasture. He never fathomed that his mother, the sweet old lady knitting by the fire, had a small fortune and lethal force hidden behind the pinto beans. I carried my hardware into my bedroom and locked it inside my personal floor safe, buried under a rug in the closet. I sat down in my rocking chair by the window overlooking the pens. The sun was starting to dip, bleeding orange and violet across the sky. It looked gorgeous, peaceful, but I knew the peace was dead. Roger had unlatched the gate for the wolf. Now the wolf was circling, and my son was sitting in a concrete box, probably crying and blaming me for his ruined life. I pulled out my phone and hit Jackson's number again. "Bernie," he answered instantly. "I got the kid in holding. He's throwing a massive fit. Swears you kidnapped him, says you've lost your damn mind. Let him scream, Jackson. Let him tire himself out. Has anyone come looking for him? Nobody yet. But Bernie, this is messy. A judge is going to want evidence. This is going to be a long, drawn-out process. I have evidence, Jackson, and I'll get more. But right now, I need a personal favor. Name it. I need you to run a name for me. Elias Montgomery. And I need you to keep Roger locked in that cell for as long as humanly possible, for his own good. Montgomery." Jackson let out a long, heavy breath. The dead air on the line confirmed my worst fears. "Bernie, that guy is pure poison. Heavy hitters out of the city, if Roger owes him money." "I know, Jackson. That's exactly why my son needs to stay somewhere Montgomery can't easily reach him. Jail is the safest place on earth for him right now, even if the idiot doesn't realize it. All right. I'll pull some strings, delay his bail hearing. But watch your back, Bernie. Keep your doors locked. Don't you worry about me, Jackson." I sleep with one eye open. I hung up. Night swallowed Hope Ranch. The only sounds were the crickets and the distant lowing of a restless cow. I brewed a pot of coffee, thick as mud. I wasn't going to get much sleep tonight. I pulled a fresh legal pad and a pen out of a drawer. I sat at the dining room table under the harsh yellow glow of the overhead light. I flipped to the first page. In big, block letters, I wrote, "Battle plan. I'm not a 4-star general. I'm not a military tactician. I'm a rancher. I know how to protect the herd from coyotes. I know when to build a higher fence, and I know when you have to grab the rifle and go hunting." Roger thought he was pulling a fast one on a helpless old widow. Tomorrow, when the sun came up, the whole world, including my son's loan sharks, was going to find out that there is no sweet old lady living on this ranch. The matriarch lives here. And the matriarch just declared war. I slammed the notebook shut. The sound echoed through the empty house like a gunshot. I was ready. The sun hadn't even crested the foothills when I was already in the kitchen grinding coffee beans. The dark, bitter smell filled the room, a smell that always reminded me that the day starts whether you give it permission or not. My hands, knotted and sun-spotted, moved with the muscle memory of 1,000 identical mornings. But today was different. Today I wasn't milking cows or checking dropped fence lines. Today I was building an invisible fortress around my life. Toby walked in at 5:30, punctual as a heart attack. He took off his hat at the door and accepted the steaming tin mug I handed him without a word. We drank in silence for a few minutes, listening to the ranch wake up. The roosters crowing, the horses snorting in their stalls, the wind rustling the branches of the old oak. "Toby," I said, shattering the quiet, "we aren't pushing the herd to the north pastures today. I want all the livestock pulled in close to the main house. And the boys, tell them to drop the brush clearing. Have them ride the perimeter fence along the highway. I want every post and every strand of barbed wire checked." Toby looked at me over the rim of his mug. His dark eyes, set deep in a face like tanned leather, sparked with understanding. "We expecting company, boss?" "The kind that doesn't call ahead, Toby. The kind that seeps in like rot. Understood? And the shotguns. Cleaned and loaded, but out of sight. I don't want anyone flashing iron like an idiot. If we have to use them, we use them. But we don't show our hand early. Surprise is the only advantage an old woman has against a pack of wolves." Toby nodded, drained his coffee in one gulp, and walked out. I watched him head toward the bunkhouse with the heavy, grounded stride of a man who knows every grain of dirt he walks on. I was alone again. I changed into my town clothes. A heavy denim skirt, a white blouse starched stiff, and my good boots, the ones that hold a shine even after 10 years. I draped my scapular around my neck and grabbed my walking stick, carved out of solid hickory. I don't need it to walk. My legs hold me up just fine. But it's good for pointing, for pushing back brush, and, if push comes to shove, for cracking a thick skull. I climbed into the truck and pointed the grill toward the city, driving right past the county line where Roger was rotting in a cell. I wasn't going to see him, not yet. My mother's heart was bleeding, sure. I wanted to bring him a hot meal and shake him until he told me why. But my patriarch's brain knew that showing an ounce of weakness right now would dig our graves. First, I had to secure the roof over our heads. Then I'd see if I could salvage the prodigal son who tried to burn it down. I drove 2 hours straight into the city. The traffic was a headache. So many cars, so much noise, millions of people sprinting to nowhere. I parked in front of Arthur Vance's law office. He was an old-school attorney, a relic who used to hunt duck with my father. His office smelled like dusty law books and pipe tobacco, the scent of ironclad contracts and gentlemen's agreements. "Bernie, what a wonderful and terrible surprise," he said, pushing himself up from his leather chair with a groan. "Jackson called me." He told me about the notary. And Roger. I sat down across from him, resting both hands on the heavy knob of my walking stick. "I didn't come to cry about it, Arthur. I came to armor the ranch. Smart. If there are gambling debts, or worse, they're going to put a target on the property. Roger is the sole heir in Everett's will, correct?" "He was," I said. The words tasted like ash. "I want to change that. I want to put the land into an irrevocable trust. The dirt belongs to nobody, and it belongs to all my future grandkids, even if they aren't born yet. And I want a life estate clause for myself, giving me absolute administrative power. I want it so completely locked down that neither Roger, nor his creditors, nor God Almighty can touch a single acre as long as I have a pulse." Arthur pushed his glasses up his nose and started taking notes. We worked straight through for 3 hours. We read every clause, every microscopic line of fine print. I made absolutely sure the name Montgomery could never legally attach itself to my ranch. When I finally signed the master document, it felt like I was slamming a vault door shut. I had disinherited my only child to save him from himself, and to save the dirt that fed us. It was the most agonizing act of love I've ever committed. When I walked back outside, the sun was at high noon, baking the asphalt. I stopped at a gas station, bought a cheap burner phone, and a prepaid SIM card. I didn't want anyone tracking my pings if things went sideways. Then I started the long drive home. I was about 3 miles from the ranch gates when I saw something that made me pull my foot off the gas. A black, blacked-out SUV. One of those massive modern tanks that look like spaceships. It was parked dead on the shoulder where the dirt road meets the state highway. They weren't doing anything, just sitting there, engine idling, like vultures waiting for something to stop breathing. I felt a block of ice drop into my stomach. That primal alarm that tells you danger isn't just an idea anymore, it's a physical presence. I cruised past them, keeping my speed steady. I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes locked on the horizon, hands relaxed on the wheel, looking for all the world like a harmless grandmother driving home from the grocery store. But in the rearview mirror, I saw the headlights flick on. They pulled out. They were tailing me. I didn't floor it. If you run, you prove you're scared. If you're scared, you're prey. I held the needle at 35 miles an hour, letting the dust from my tires kick up and cloud their windshield. I grabbed the burner phone from the passenger seat and hit Toby's number. "Toby, I've got a tail," I said the second he picked up. "Black SUV. They'll be at the main gate in 10 minutes. I'm chaining the gate shut, boss. No, leave it wide open." "Open? Mrs. Bernadette, you sure?" "Wide open. But I want you and the boys working right by the house. Keep the heavy tools in your hands. And unchain the dogs. But do not let them attack unless I raise my stick. You copy?" "Copy that." I hung up. I pulled through the gates of Hope Ranch and parked my battered Ford under the shade of the weeping willow. I stepped out slow, grabbed my purse and my hickory stick, and walked up onto the porch. I sat down in my favorite rocking chair, the one that gives me a clear line of sight to the whole driveway, and I grabbed a bucket of dried corn. I started shucking the cobs into an aluminum basin, acting like my only concern in the universe was feeding the damned chickens. The black SUV rolled up the driveway, tires crunching loud on the gravel. It parked about 30 feet from the porch. The engine cut out. 2 men stepped out. They weren't local boys. They were wearing silk shirts with loud prints, tight jeans, and pointed boots that cost more than my tractor. One was heavy and sweating profusely. The other was built like a whippet, with a weasel face and pitch-black sunglasses. They started walking toward me. I didn't stop shucking the corn. Crack, scrape, rattle. The dry sound of the kernels hitting the metal basin was the only noise in the yard. "Afternoon, ma'am," the skinny one called out, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. He didn't take off his sunglasses. Terrible manners. I looked up slowly, adjusting my glasses like I was having trouble bringing him into focus. "Good afternoon to you," I answered, putting a little tremble in my voice. "Can I help you, boys? You looking to buy milk? We don't sell direct anymore." "You have to go down to the co-op." The heavy guy let out a wet, mocking laugh. "We ain't looking for milk, Grandma. We're looking for Roger." Roger Mendoza. "Oh, my sweet boy." I sighed, dropping the cob into the bucket. "He isn't here. Some very mean men came and took him away. Police officers. They said he did something awful. I just don't understand it, gentlemen. I'm all alone here, and I'm just so heartbroken." The skinny guy took a step up onto the porch. "He was in my space now. We know he's in the clink, lady. But Roger left a piece of unfinished business with our boss. Big business. He told us you were going to handle it. Said you had the paperwork all ready to go?" "Paperwork?" I asked, playing the confused senior citizen. "Oh, the pension forms." "Yes, he wanted me to sign some things for my pension, but they arrested him before we could finish." My poor baby. "Look, lady, let's cut the crap." The skinny guy pulled off his glasses. His eyes were dead, reptilian. "We're here for the deed to the ranch, or the cash. It's 50 grand, plus the vig. Let's call it 80,000 for our trouble. You hand over the cash right now, we walk away, and this never happened. If you don't, well, this is a big property. Accidents happen, barns burn down, cows get sick. You know how it is. The threat was sitting there, clear as glass. I set the metal basin on the floorboards. I wiped my hands on my apron, grabbed my walking stick, and pushed myself up, letting the wooden chair creak loudly. $80,000. I mumbled. That is an awful lot of money for a widow. I bet you got something stuffed in the mattress, Grandma. Go look. I walked right up to the porch railing. I was 3 feet from the skinny guy's face. I could smell his expensive cologne and his menthol breath. "Boys," I said, and my voice dropped an octave. The tremble vanished. It was the voice I used to command the ranch. "I think you boys are highly confused." The skinny guy frowned, catching the shift in tone. "Say what?" "I said you're trespassing on private property. And on this ranch, mothers do not pay their sons' debts. Roger is a grown man. If he owes Mr. Montgomery money, mister." Montgomery can take it up with him. At the mention of Montgomery's name, both men went rigid. The heavy guy dropped his hand to his waistband, right under his untucked shirt. "You know the boss?" the skinny guy asked, dropping his voice to a whisper. "I know his type." I shot back, locking eyes with him. And I know Elias Montgomery isn't the kind of man to get cow shit on his Italian shoes. That's why he sends lapdogs like you. "You crazy old bitch!" the heavy guy barked, pulling a black semi-automatic from his belt. In that exact fraction of a second, I raised my hickory stick and slammed it into the wooden floorboards. One single, deafening crack. It worked like dark magic. From behind the blooming bougainvillea bushes, 3 of my ranch hands stepped out. Toby stepped around the corner of the house. Every single one of them was holding a work machete. The kind that shines like silver because it's used every single day to hack through sugarcane and ironwood. They didn't point them. They just stood there, casually peeling an orange or wiping down the blade, staring at the hitmen with that terrifying, dead-eyed calm that only country folks possess. And the dogs, Buster, Spot, and Captain, my 3 cattle dogs, slid out from under the porch crawl space. They were growling so low it vibrated in the dirt, the hair on their spines standing straight up, baring their teeth inches from the intruder's ankles. The heavy guy froze, his gun half raised. He looked at the dogs, he looked at the machetes, he looked at Toby, who was holding a heavy steel shovel like it weighed absolutely nothing. "Put that away, son," I told the heavy guy, my voice soft. "We don't like loud noises around here. It upsets the hens. And if you pull that trigger, my dogs will rip your throat out before the brass hits the dirt." And if the dogs miss, Toby won't. The skinny guy put a hand on his partner's forearm, slowly pushing the gun back down. He could do the math. 2 of them against 5 men, 3 attack dogs, and an old woman who hadn't even blinked. "We're leaving," the skinny guy said, taking a slow step backward. "But this ain't over, lady. The boss doesn't forgive." "You tell Elias," I said, walking down the steps so I was on their level, invading their space now. "You tell him that Hope Ranch does not belong to Roger anymore. As of this morning, it is the property of a corporate bank trust. If you shoot me, or if you burn my house down, the bank seizes the asset and the federal government steps in. You tell him if he wants to collect, he can go stand in line at the federal courthouse." It was a half-truth, but it sounded bureaucratic and terrifying enough to stop them cold. Street thugs hate the feds and they hate corporate lawyers. They deal in cheap fear, and I had just stripped them of their only weapon. "And one more thing," I added, reaching deep into my apron pocket. Both men flinched, fully expecting me to pull a gun. I pulled out a glass jar of homemade peach preserves I'd canned last week. I held it out to the skinny guy. "Take this, for your nerves. A little sugar to wash down the bitter taste of a wasted trip." The skinny guy looked at the jar, then looked at my face. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He couldn't process it. He didn't know if I was mocking him, threatening him, or just completely insane. He took the jar with a shaking hand. "Now get the hell off my land," I ordered, slamming the stick into the dirt. "And if you ever come back, I won't be handing out jam. Next time, I'm handing out lead." They scrambled into the SUV. The heavy guy almost tripped over his own boots. They slammed it in reverse, tires spinning and throwing a massive cloud of dust and gravel, fleeing like the devil himself was on their bumper. I stood there in the driveway until the black SUV disappeared over the ridge. My legs, which had been as solid as oak trees a minute ago, suddenly turned to water. I had to lean all my weight onto my walking stick. Toby walked up quietly and took my elbow. "You all right, boss?" "I'm fine, Toby." "I'm fine. You think they'll be back?" "Not them. They're just errand boys. But the man holding their leashes, that's a different story." "We won some respect today, Toby, but we just declared an all-out war." I stared down the empty road. The late afternoon sun was washing my land in a gorgeous golden light. Everything looked so peaceful, but I knew it was borrowed time. I had used my age, my wits, and the loyalty of my men to scare off the coyotes. But Elias Montgomery wasn't a coyote. He was an old, battle-scarred wolf. I walked back into the house. My hands were shaking a little now that the adrenaline was draining out of my blood. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. As I drank, I caught my reflection in the dark window glass. I didn't see Bernadette the victim anymore. I didn't see Bernadette the grieving mother. I saw Bernadette, the general. Roger had dragged a hurricane to our front porch. Well, let it rain. I have deep roots, and I am not moving. I pulled out the burner phone again. I had one more call to make. Not to the cops. Not to the lawyers. I had to call my nephews, my late sister's boys, up in the high country. They are rough, mountain boys who don't give a damn about the law, but they understand blood, and they understand defending the family. If Elias Montgomery wanted to play dirty, I was going to show him that we fight much better in the mud. I dialed the number. Yeah, a young, gravelly voice answered. Hey, son. It's your Aunt Bernie. I need you and your brothers to come down here. There's work at the ranch. The kind of work that pays in honor, not cash. I smiled. A tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. The silent execution of my plan had begun. The ranch hands were my shield. The law was my fortress wall. But my family was going to be my sword. Dawn at Hope Ranch had always been my absolute moment of peace, but that morning, the air felt thick, electric, like the dead calm right before a summer hailstorm. The rumble in the distance wasn't thunder. It was the engine of a beat-up truck climbing the grade. My dogs, who had been vicious killers yesterday, were wagging their tails now. They knew exactly who was coming. Austin and his brothers hopped out of the faded Chevy. My nephews, Jacinta's boys, God rest her soul. They were mountain men, with massive hands and short vocabularies, guys raised up in the pines and the fog, where the law either arrives 3 hours late or doesn't arrive at all. Austin, the oldest, pulled off his cap when he saw me on the porch. He had that dead calm stare of a man who has seen ugly things and doesn't flinch anymore. Aunt Bernie, he said, kissing my hand with an old-world respect. Austin, thank you for getting here so fast. Blood calls, Auntie. And if blood is in trouble, the iron comes with it. They weren't carrying machetes like my farmhands. They were carrying long, heavy bundles wrapped in moving blankets in the bed of the truck. I didn't ask what was inside. I didn't need to. I pointed them toward the rear barns, telling them to set up where they couldn't be seen from the main road, but where they had a 360-degree view of the property. Hope Ranch didn't just have eyes anymore. Now it had fangs. With the perimeter secured, it was time to face the most agonizing part of the plan. I had Toby drive me into town in my truck. I didn't want to drive. I needed to sit and think, rehearsing every single syllable I was about to say. When we walked into the precinct, the smell of damp concrete and cheap bleach made my stomach roll. Jackson was waiting for me, looking grim. Bernie, this is insane. The kid has been crying for 2 days. Says he's freezing. Says the food is slop. It's county lockup, Jackson, not the Ritz-Carlton. I snapped, even though my heart was shriveling up inside my chest. Let me see him. They walked me back to the holding cells. There was Roger, my little boy. The man who used to draw me pictures with crayons was sitting on a concrete slab, his clothes wrinkled to hell, sporting a 3-day beard. When he saw me, he jumped up and practically threw himself against the bars. Mom, please, get me out of here, he begged, his eyes bloodshot and wild. I swear to God I didn't want to do it. They forced me. They're going to kill me, Mom. I stood there in front of his cell, keeping my distance. I didn't want him to see my hands shaking. Nobody is going to kill you in here, Roger. You're perfectly safe. You don't get it. Montgomery doesn't mess around. If I don't hand over the deed. The deed doesn't exist anymore, Roger. I cut him off, my voice like a whip. The ranch is in a blind trust. Nobody can sell it. Not you, not me, not the Pope himself, if he floated down from the sky. Roger froze. His hand slipped off the iron bars and he stumbled backward, collapsing onto the cot like a puppet with its strings cut. "What did you do?" he whispered. "You killed us. He's going to come for us. Let him come," I said, finally stepping right up to the steel grid. "But I need to know one thing, and you better not lie to me this time, because this is the absolute last chance you have to be my son instead of a stranger. Why the ranch? Why was he so obsessed with Hope Ranch? There are bigger properties, prettier ones." Roger buried his face in his hands. He sobbed the exact same way he did when he was 5 and broke his favorite toy. "The water, Mom. It's the well. Montgomery bought up all the dead dirt to the north to build a luxury subdivision, but they hit dry rock. The surveys show our well taps directly into the main aquifer. Without Hope Ranch, his multi-million-dollar project is just dust." I felt a spike of pure, unadulterated rage. It wasn't just dirty gambling money. It was our water, the lifeblood of the land. They wanted to bleed my pastures dry so rich folks could fill their swimming pools. "I see," I said, standing up perfectly straight. "So it isn't just a debt. It's a corporate acquisition. Mom, please, just pay him whatever he wants. Sell off the herd, give him the cash so they back off." I looked at him with a sadness so deep it hollowed me out. Roger still didn't get it. He honestly believed you could calm a tiger by throwing it a steak, not realizing that once it tastes blood, it eats your whole arm. I am not paying him a single red cent. You dug this hole because you were greedy and you were stupid. Now you are going to sit in this cage and keep your mouth shut until I say otherwise. This is the only place on earth Montgomery can't put a bullet in you without making national news. Mom, don't leave me here. I'm not leaving you, son. I'm protecting you, even if you hate me for it. I walked out of the precinct with my soul shredded to pieces, but my mind was laser-focused. I finally had the missing puzzle piece. This wasn't a standard shakedown. It was a ruthless business deal wearing a ski mask. Elias Montgomery desperately needed my water, and that meant he couldn't kill me, at least, not yet. He needed me alive to sign a contract, or he needed the ranch entirely empty. I rode back to the house. The midday sun was beating down hard. Austin stepped out to meet me in the driveway. "Auntie, a truck has cruised past the gates twice. Slow. A gray Raptor. Tinted windows. It's him," I said. I felt it deep in my marrow. "It's him, or his right-hand man. Austin, swing the main gates wide open. You sure about that? I want them open. Let them drive right up to the front door if they want, but tell your brothers to get on their marks. I want Hope Ranch looking like a ghost town until I give the word." I sat down on the front porch. I poured myself a glass of iced lemonade, set a leather folder containing Arthur Vance's trust documents on the coffee table, and put my burner phone right next to it, and I waited. 20 minutes later, the gray Raptor rolled onto the property. Right behind it was the black SUV from yesterday. It was a motorcade. They parked in the dirt right in front of the house. The dust settled slowly. A man stepped out of the Raptor. He wasn't young, maybe 50. Wearing a light linen suit that cost more than my annual harvest, and Italian loafers that had absolutely no business touching gravel, he took off a pair of designer sunglasses, looked at my house with sheer disgust, and then looked at me with a smile that was trying to be polite but showed way too many teeth. "Elias Montgomery." "Mrs. Bernadette," he said, spreading his arms like we were old college buddies. "What an absolute pleasure to finally meet you. Your son has told me so much about you." I stayed seated, rocking gently in my chair. Creak, creak, creak. "Mr. Montgomery, it's a damn shame I can't say the same. The only thing my son ever told me about you is that you're a thief and a coward who threatens old women." Elias's smile didn't slip, but his eyes went dead. He flicked 2 fingers, and his muscles stepped out of the black SUV. 4 of them. Huge, ugly-looking guys. I see you're a woman of character. I respect that. But I came here to offer you a business deal, Bernie. Let's forget about Roger's little debts. I want to buy the ranch. I'll pay you double market value, in cash. Right here, right now. He pulled a heavy aluminum briefcase out of the back seat and dropped it onto the hood of his truck. He popped the latches, stacks of $100 bills. Obscene amounts of money, enough cash to live comfortably for 10 lifetimes. And if I say no? I asked, taking a slow sip of my lemonade. Bernie, he sighed, slamming the briefcase shut. You're a senior citizen. Accidents happen. Old houses have faulty wiring and catch fire. People trip and fall down wells. It would be an absolute tragedy if Hope Ranch suddenly lost its owner. Then your grandchildren, if you have any, would inherit a nightmare instead of a gold mine. He dropped the threat as softly as a feather, but it weighed a ton. You make a fair point, Elias. I am old, and old folks learn a few tricks. I set my glass down and rested my hand on the leather folder. First off, I don't own this ranch anymore. Yesterday, I executed an irrevocable trust. The title is held by a corporate bank in New York. If I die, if I go missing, or if I sign any piece of paper under duress, the contract automatically voids, and the deed is instantly donated to the Department of Defense to be used as a federal training range. So if you kill me, you don't get your water. You get the U.S. military as your next-door neighbor. Does that sound good for your luxury subdivision? Montgomery's smile vanished. He took a hard step forward, invading my lawn. You're bluffing. Test me, I said, holding his gaze. Second, I know you're desperate for the aquifer. Roger sings like a canary when he's scared. And I'm willing to bet your wealthy investors have no idea you're out here threatening widows to secure their plumbing. I have a manila envelope, Elias. It's full of photos of your goons visiting me yesterday, audio recordings of Roger's phone calls, and a stolen copy of your illegal water diversion blueprints. That envelope is sitting on the desk of an investigative journalist in the city. If I don't call him every 12 hours to say I'm breathing, he opens it, and your face is on the front page of tomorrow's paper. Montgomery's face turned purple. The vein in his neck looked ready to burst. You crazy old bitch, he screamed, dropping the corporate act completely. Get up there and drag her out. Burn the damn house down. The 4 guerrillas took a step toward the porch, reaching under their jackets to draw their weapons. That was when I raised my hickory stick. I didn't hit the floor. I just pointed it at the roof of the main barn. Clack, clack. The unmistakable, bone-chilling sound of a pump-action shotgun racking a shell shattered the silence. Austin and his 3 brothers stepped out of the shadows, 1 on the roof of the house, 2 in the barn loft, 1 behind the porch pillars. They weren't holding handguns. They were holding high-powered hunting rifles and sawed-off shotguns, the kind mountain boys use to drop elk or defend marijuana crops from cartels. 4 barrels aimed dead at the skulls of Montgomery's men. The goons froze. They knew the difference between a threat and a firing squad. They were totally exposed, outgunned, and lacking the high ground. Elias, I said, my voice perfectly calm, ringing out in the deadly quiet. Allow me to introduce my nephews. They drove down from the mountains. They don't use lawyers up there. They use other methods. And they have 0 patience for city boys who don't know how to knock. Montgomery looked up at the roof. He saw the dark steel barrels tracking him. He saw Austin, who wasn't even blinking. He looked at his men and realized they were dead meat. Stand down, Montgomery choked out, his voice strangled with fury. Smart choice, I said. Now you listen to me, because I will not repeat myself. Roger's debt is officially wiped clean. Consider it a tax for the massive inconvenience you've caused me, and for scaring me half to death yesterday. We're calling it Emotional damages. Are you out of your mind? You think I'm just going to eat 50 grand? You aren't going to eat it, Elias. You're going to completely forget it. Because if you ever step foot on my dirt again, or if my son gets so much as a scratch on him in county lockup, I am personally going to drive to Georgetown. I'm going to find your mother, Mrs. Montgomery, who goes to Street Jude's every Sunday at 6, and I am going to sit down and tell her exactly what her successful businessman of a son is doing for a living. And trust me, Elias, you might not be scared of the cops, but I know damn well you are terrified of your mother. Montgomery's eyes bulged out of his head. Dropping his mother's name was the kill shot. In this country, even the hardest criminals flinch when you bring up their mama. How the hell do you know that? Because old women gossip, Elias. We know everything. And I have friends everywhere. Elias Montgomery violently yanked his suit jacket straight, desperately trying to salvage a shred of dignity. This isn't over, Bernie. Yes, Elias, it is. Because you need water. And the only thing you're ever going to find on this property is lead and public humiliation. Go find another well and take your dirty money with you. Montgomery glared at me with pure hatred, but there was something else in his eyes now. Respect. Or maybe just fear. He spun on his heel, got into his Raptor, and slammed the door. His goons backed away slowly, keeping their eyes glued to my nephews on the roof, and piled into their SUV. The motorcade ripped a U-turn and tore out of the ranch 10 times faster than they drove in. When the dust finally settled, Austin dropped down from the porch roof, landing with the silent grace of a bobcat. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and shot me a half smile. Auntie, you are ruthless. Bringing up his mom? That was a low blow. I let out a massive breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands started shaking again, but this time, I let myself laugh. A nervous, wildly liberating laugh. Austin, honey, all's fair in love and war. And this was war. You think they'll spin back around? Montgomery won't. He's a numbers guy, and I just made this project a total financial loss. He'll go look for an easier target. I pushed myself out of the rocking chair. My body felt like it was made of lead, like I'd been hauling concrete all day. But the ranch was still there. The wind was still rustling the oak leaves. The water was still flowing deep under our boots. Safe. We had won the battle. We had saved the dirt. But the cost was heavy. That night, sitting at the dinner table with my nephews, eating a massive pot of beef stew and homemade tortillas to celebrate, I couldn't stop staring at Roger's empty chair. I had crushed the enemy at the gates. I had broken a powerful man, but the victory tasted like ash in my mouth. I had taken back my power. I had transformed into the iron matriarch that everyone feared, but in doing so, I proved that I was entirely alone. My son didn't stand by me out of loyalty. He only obeyed out of fear. I took a sip of black coffee and looked across the table at Austin. He'd make a hell of a ranch manager. Maybe it was time to start thinking about a new heir. Auntie, Austin said, pulling me out of my head. What are we doing about Cousin Roger? I set my mug down. The clink of ceramic against wood sounded incredibly final. Roger stays exactly where he is for a little while longer. He needs to learn that actions have severe consequences. And when he gets out, we'll see if he wants to work the land as a hired hand, because his shot at being the boss is gone. I stood up and walked over to the window. The moon was casting a silver glow over my pastures. Hope Ranch was safe. Bernadette was still standing, and the whole damn world just found out that you do not rob, lie to, or terrify this old woman. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. I had to go to the bank, the courthouse, and church. But tonight I was going to sleep like a baby, with the shotgun under the bed and the absolute certainty that my ranch was still mine. 3 full weeks passed before I finally decided to pull Roger out of jail. 3 weeks of the sun rising and setting over Hope Ranch without a single soul trying to steal the air out of our lungs. 3 weeks where my nephews, Those mountain boys who barely speak but work like mules, strung up new fence lines and patched the barn roof my own son had let rot out of sheer laziness. The house felt different. It didn't have that suffocating, terrified silence of a woman sitting alone, waiting for the axe to fall. Now there was the heavy thud of work boots, the smell of fresh coffee at all hours, and deep laughter echoing across the yard. Austin had become my shadow and my right hand. Whenever my strength gave out, he was right there, without me having to ask, without him expecting a thank you. He did it out of that unspoken code that good men carry. The day I drove into town to get Roger, I didn't wear my Sunday best. I wore my work clothes, faded jeans, a plaid flannel, and Everett's old Stetson. I wanted him to understand, the exact second he laid eyes on me, that I wasn't here to pick up Mommy's little boy. I was here to pick up a man who owed a debt he could never fully repay. I walked into the precinct. Jackson slid Roger's personal effects across the counter in a clear plastic bag. His flashy watch, his empty leather wallet, his fancy belt. "He's lost weight, Bernie," Jackson warned me, keeping his voice low. "And he's quiet. Hasn't said a single word in 5 days." "Good," I said, grabbing the bag. Silence teaches you a hell of a lot more than screaming. When the deputy cranked the steel door open, Roger shuffled out. A thick beard covered his face. His hair was slick with grease, and he smelled like the inside of a cell, that sour mix of stale sweat and pure hopelessness that bakes right into your bones in a place like this. When he saw me, he didn't run to hug me. He stopped dead in his tracks, dropped his chin to his chest, and stared at my muddy work boots. "Let's go," I said, turning my back and walking out without waiting for him. He trailed behind me to the truck, climbed into the passenger seat, and stared blankly out the window, his hands clamped tight between his knees. I cranked the ignition, and we pulled out of town. Nobody said a word for the first 15 miles. The landscape blurred past us, green and alive, totally indifferent to our misery. "Did you pay him?" he finally croaked, his voice raw, still not looking at me. "I didn't pay a single dime, Roger." He whipped his head around, sheer panic flooding his hollow eyes. "Then Montgomery is going to." "Montgomery isn't going to do a damn thing," I cut him off, gripping the steering wheel tight. "Montgomery figured out that messing with this old woman costs a lot more than the water under our dirt. He's gone, and he's never coming back." Roger slumped back against the seat, exhaling a breath that sounded like 100-pound weight had been lifted off his chest. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw a single, genuine tear slide down his filthy cheek. "Thank you, Mom. I swear to God, I'm going to change. I'll sell the car. I'll get a job in the city. I'll pay you back every last cent." I slammed on the brakes, pulling hard onto the gravel shoulder. A cloud of dust washed over the cab. I unclicked my seatbelt and twisted in my seat to look him dead in the face. "Listen to me very carefully, because I am only going to say this once. You aren't going to any city. You aren't selling anything, because you don't own anything. Austin already sold that ridiculous sports car of yours to buy winter feed for the herd." "Austin? What the hell is Austin doing here?" he asked, totally lost. "Austin is doing the work you thought you were too good for. Austin is bleeding for the dirt you tried to sell for pocket change." I reached into the glove box and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a deed. It was a standard contract I typed up myself and had Arthur Vance notarize. "Read it." Roger took the paper with shaking hands. His eyes darted back and forth across the page in absolute disbelief. "General farmhand contract," he read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, what is this?" "It's your only lifeline, Roger. Hope Ranch is legally locked in a blind trust. You are no longer my sole heir. If I drop dead tomorrow, the estate is managed by a board consisting of Austin, Arthur Vance, and the local pastor. You don't get a single pebble." I watched his face completely fall apart. The fantasy of the easy inheritance, of the lazy rich boy lifestyle, crumbled to dust right in his hands. "But I'm your son." "Exactly," I said, and it physically hurt my chest to say it, but I kept my voice like steel. "Because you are my son, I am not going to let you starve to death. But I am also done letting you be a parasite. You have a roof and hot meals at the ranch, but you are going to work. You're going to be out of bed at 4 in the morning with Toby. You're going to shovel out the stalls, you're going to vaccinate the calves, and you're going to string barbed wire. You'll make minimum wage, exactly like the rest of the hands. And if you don't like it, the door is unlocked. You can start walking down the highway right now." Roger stared at the contract. He stared at the empty stretch of highway. And finally, he looked at me. He was searching for his mother, for the sweet old lady who always bailed him out. But she wasn't there. He was looking at the boss. "Sign it." I held out a pen. He pressed the paper against the dashboard and signed. His signature, which used to be huge and arrogant, came out tiny and trembling. I folded the paper, put the truck in drive, and got back on the road. When we pulled through the gates, the transformation was impossible to miss. The front fences were painted brilliant white, gleaming in the sun. The front yard, which had been choked with weeds for a year, was freshly tilled, the rose bushes pruned back. Austin was sitting on the porch, wiping down a rifle with an oily rag. When he saw the truck, he stood up slowly, tall and immovable as an oak. Roger stepped out of the cab and just stood there, looking like a trespasser on his own childhood home. Austin walked down the steps and stopped right in front of him. He didn't smile, but he stuck out his hand. "Welcome back, cousin. We got a lot of work to do." Roger hesitated for a second. He looked at Austin's calloused hand, looked at my stone-cold face, and finally reached out and shook his cousin's hand. It was a brief grip, zero warmth, but it was a start. "Go change your clothes." I ordered Roger. "Toby is waiting for you in the equipment shed. You're starting by mucking out stable number 3. Roger gave a tight nod, tucked his chin, and walked toward the house. But he didn't go through the front door. He walked around back to the mudroom, the workers' entrance. He knew his place. I stayed out on the porch with Austin. The afternoon breeze was kicking through the mesquite trees. "You think he'll last, Auntie?" Austin asked, watching the door close behind my son. "I don't know, honey. Pride is a terminal disease, but manual labor is a hell of a cure. If he sticks it out, maybe one day he'll be a man again. And if he quits, well, at least I'll know I did everything I could." The next few months were brutal. Watching my own flesh and blood sweating out under the brutal sun, his hands blistered open, his back bent double, it wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to grab a pitcher of ice water, walk out there, and tell him to come inside and sit in the AC. But I bit my tongue so hard it bled, and I stayed behind the glass. I knew that if I showed him an ounce of pity, I'd lose him forever. Pity doesn't build men, it breeds parasites. The town, naturally, couldn't stop talking. The rumors flew that old Bernie had finally lost her marbles, that she'd enslaved her own son, that the hillbilly nephews had staged a hostile takeover. I let them run their mouths. When I went to the Sunday market, I walked with my spine straight, leaning lightly on my hickory stick, giving everyone a sharp, ironic smile. One day at the butcher counter, I ran into the notary's mother, Mrs. Gables, one of those professional gossips who practically lives in the church pews but crucifies everyone she meets. "Oh, Bernie," she cooed in that sickly sweet voice. "It is just such a tragedy about your Roger. People say you have him living like a day laborer. Doesn't that just eat you up with guilt? With your money, you could easily buy him a nice condo in the city." I looked at her over the rim of my glasses, the glasses that were now my armor. "Look, Mrs. Gables," I said, projecting my voice so every single person in line could hear me. I'd feel guilty if I raised a thief or a useless brat. I am raising a man, even if it took me 40 years to get started. And let me tell you something else. I would much rather my son have calluses on his hands from honest dirt than have perfectly clean fingernails from signing fraudulent contracts, like some people we know. The butcher shop went dead silent. Mrs. Gables turned the color of raw beef and didn't utter another syllable. I paid for my steaks and walked out. I could feel the heavy stares of respect hitting my back. I wasn't the sad, poor widow anymore. I was the woman who looked fate in the eye and told it to back the hell up. But the real transformation wasn't the ranch, and it wasn't the town's gossip. It was me. One afternoon, months later, I took a walk down to the southern property line, where the creek cuts through the land. I sat down on a massive boulder under the shade of an ancient cypress tree. The water was running crystal clear and ice cold. That was the water they almost killed me for, the absolute lifeblood of my dirt. And sitting there, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Before all this, every little ache in my joints, every forgotten name, made me feel like the end was closing in, like I was becoming invisible, disposable. Now every wrinkle felt like a combat ribbon. I had figured out the great secret. Old age isn't a death sentence of irrelevance. It is a tactical advantage. Because when you have absolutely nothing left to lose, when you stop giving a damn what polite society thinks of you, when you accept that the Grim Reaper is just another uninvited guest who'll show up when he's good and ready, you become dangerous. You become completely free. I heard boots crunching in the brush behind me. I spun around, my hand instinctively dropping to my hickory stick. It was Roger. He was lean now, baked dark by the sun. The muscles in his forearms popped against the dirt-stained fabric of his t-shirt. He pulled off his hat. He didn't have that shifty, arrogant look anymore. His eyes were exhausted, but they were clear, the eyes of a man who actually earned his dinner. "Mother," he said. "He didn't use that whiny mom anymore." He said mother. And he meant it. "What is it, Roger? You throwing in the towel?" "No, just came to tell you the spotted cow, the sick one. She just dropped her calf. Big, healthy male. Toby says he'll make a hell of a breeding bull." I smiled. A real, honest-to-God smile. "And what do you say?" Roger thought about it for a second, staring down at the running water. "I say he got lucky being born here. The dirt is good this year. The grass is coming in thick." And there it was. The absolute miracle. He didn't ask what the calf would sell for at auction. He didn't calculate the cash. He talked about the dirt. He talked about the life. "Good," I told him. "Get back to it. Make sure the mother has enough water." "Yes, Mother." He turned around and headed back up the trail. I watched him walk away. His stride was heavy, grounded, stepping squarely in his own shadow. He wasn't the perfect son. He never would be. But he wasn't my enemy anymore. I sat there a little longer, listening to the wind cut through the canyon. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wooden rosary, the exact same one I was clutching in that freezing notary's office a lifetime ago. I looked down at my hands. They were old, sun-damaged, warped by arthritis. But they were hands that had built an empire, defended it with iron, and rebuilt the wreckage. Elias Montgomery never showed his face again. I read in the city paper that his luxury development went bankrupt due to unforeseen geological issues, and he was fighting massive fraud indictments up north. I had a contact drop a single jar of homemade peach preserves on his desk in the city. No note, just the jar. I'm fairly certain he got the message. I'm still here. I'm still watching. And I have a pantry full of glass. I pushed myself up off the rock, leaning heavily on my hickory stick. The sun was dipping low, setting the sky on fire in brilliant streaks of violent purple and burnt orange. The exact same sky that hung over me the day I decided to go to war. I walked the trail back to the main house, taking my time. When I crested the hill, I saw my nephews sitting on the porch, passing a beer and laughing with Toby. Roger was sitting on the bottom step, a little off to the side, but listening, part of the crew. Quietly peeling an orange with his pocket knife, Austin saw me walking up and immediately stood up, vacating my chair. "Have a seat, Auntie. Coffee's hot." I sat down in my rocker. The queen on her wicker throne. I wrapped my hands around the steaming mug and looked around my yard. This was my family. Not the flawless, blood-perfect family you see in commercials, but the one I forged in a blast furnace of discipline and fire. Hope Ranch had its matriarch, and she wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. And when my time finally comes, when my ashes are just another handful of dust blowing across the high pastures, my story will stay anchored in this dirt. Not as the tragic tale of a poor widow who almost lost her farm, but as the legend of Bernadette, the woman who broke the wolves and dragged her own son kicking and screaming into manhood. I took a slow sip of black coffee and stared out at the dark horizon, where the first cold stars were just starting to burn. Let them come, whoever they are, we'll be waiting. Because out here, the old guard doesn't die of fear. We die on our feet, and only when we damn well please.